Right now, there is very likely a green organism quietly destroying your roof. You probably cannot see it clearly from the ground, but it is there, and it has been there for longer than you think. Moss does not just sit on top of shingles looking bad. It physically penetrates the surface layer, lifts the edges, traps moisture against the wood underneath, and in climates with freeze and thaw cycles, that trapped water expands every winter and cracks the shingle material a little more with each cycle. By the time the damage becomes visible enough that you call a roofer, the answer you get back is a number between $9,000 and $30,000. But there is a white powder that costs $4 to $8 for enough material to treat your entire roof, takes less than 10 minutes to apply from the ground without ever setting foot on a ladder, and kills every trace of moss and algae within 3 weeks, while protecting your shingles for up to 2 full years. Medieval church builders across Scandinavia understood the principle behind this compound 700 years ago. A French physician proved the science in 1852. A laboratory study in Ohio compiled 312 confirming citations in 1973, and the $76 billion American roofing industry has never mentioned it once. Stay right here. Welcome to Everyday Secrets Formula, where we find practical knowledge that genuinely works, trace its history, and explain clearly why an industry with financial incentive to keep you uninformed never told you about it. If you're new here, subscribe before this video ends. What comes next on this channel is going to be just as useful as what you are about to hear. Now let us talk about your roof, what is actually destroying it, and the compound that stops that destruction for the price of a fast food meal. To understand why this powder works the way it does, you need to understand what moss actually is, and what it is doing to your shingles at the structural level. Most homeowners look at a mossy roof and see an aesthetic problem, something that makes the house look neglected. That framing is one of the most expensive misconceptions in residential home maintenance. Moss is a primitive plant, but it does not have the same type of roots that grass or garden plants have. Instead, it anchors itself using thread-like structures called rhizoids that physically penetrate the microscopic pores of asphalt shingle surfaces. As the moss colony grows outward, those rhizoids wedge deeper and deeper between the shingle layers, creating tiny gaps that allow rainwater to move underneath the shingle in places it was never designed to reach. In climates that experience freezing temperatures, the trapped water freezes and expands, then thaws and contracts, and with each cycle, it cracks the shingle material incrementally. Over 2 to 3 years of unchecked moss growth, the cumulative physical damage is severe. Shingles begin curling upward at the edges. The underlayment beneath them absorbs moisture and begins to fail. The wooden roof deck itself starts rotting from the inside out, which is the stage at which a contractor tells you the entire roof needs to be replaced. Prevention at that point costs between 70% and 80% less than the repair. A $4 powder treatment prevents damage that runs $10,000 to $25,000 to fix once it reaches the structural deck. And yet, almost no homeowner in America knows this powder exists. The history of why this compound works goes back to an observation that predates modern science by several centuries. Across Scandinavia and Northern Europe in the medieval period, church builders noticed something that was visually undeniable, even if they could not explain the chemistry behind it. Buildings topped with copper roofing materials stayed completely free of moss and biological growth for generations, while every wooden and stone structure surrounding them turned green with organic growth within a decade. The pattern was consistent enough that it shaped building decisions. If you were constructing something intended to endure, you used copper on the roof, not for decoration, but because observation had established that copper and biological growth on roofs were simply incompatible. Nobody understood why. The mechanism would not be explained for another 3 or 4 centuries. In 1852, a French physician named Victor Burke was investigating the cholera epidemics moving through Paris and noticed something statistically significant in the mortality data. Workers in copper smelting facilities had dramatically lower death rates from the disease than the general population. This was not a minor statistical variation. It was a substantial and repeatable pattern that Burke spent the next 15 years investigating systematically across hospitals, factories, and neighborhoods with different levels of copper exposure. He presented his findings to the French Academy of Sciences and the French Academy of Medicine in 1867, establishing that copper had a powerful and consistent ability to kill organic pathogens on contact, at concentrations so low they were essentially invisible. The scientific community of the era acknowledged the finding, but did not have the microscopy or biochemistry to fully explain the mechanism. That explanation came in 1893, when a Swiss botanist named Carl Wilhelm von Nageli formally identified and named the phenomenon as the oligodynamic effect, from Greek roots meaning small force. What Nageli documented was that certain metals, most powerfully copper and zinc, release ions at concentrations so minute they are essentially undetectable, but so biologically disruptive that they are lethal to algae, mold, fungi, spores, and living microorganisms. A few ions of copper or zinc dissolved in ordinary rainwater is enough to destroy entire colonies of organic growth without any other intervention. This was the scientific explanation for what the medieval church builders had observed empirically 700 years earlier. The copper roof stayed clean because every rainfall dissolved a trace quantity of copper ions that made the entire roof surface hostile to biological growth at the cellular level. For the 80 years following Naegeli's publication, this knowledge quietly shaped the architecture of significant buildings worldwide. Copper roofing became standard practice for government buildings, cathedrals, universities, financial institutions, and national monuments. The 1727 Christ Church in Philadelphia still stands with its original copper roof nearly 300 years later, with no moss, no algae, and no replacement ever required. Meanwhile, the average asphalt shingle roof in America today lasts between 15 and 25 years, and 80% of all residential roofs in the country are those same asphalt shingles. In 1973, researchers at Battelle Columbus Laboratories in Ohio compiled 312 scientific citations spanning 80 years of peer-reviewed research on metal antimicrobial properties. Their conclusion was unambiguous. Copper and zinc, in very small quantities, have the documented ability to control a wide range of molds, fungi, algae, and harmful microorganisms on virtually any surface exposed to rainfall. 312 independent studies confirming the same conclusion across 8 decades. And the average American homeowner has never encountered any of this information in any home maintenance guide, hardware store, or roofing contractor consultation. This brings us to the specific compound you need, and to the mechanism that makes it so effective on a residential roof. Zinc sulfate monohydrate is a simple inorganic compound sold as a white crystalline powder at garden centers and hardware stores across the country. It is registered with the United States Environmental Protection Agency and sold under brand names like Moss Beware and Moss Out. The application process could not be simpler. You sprinkle the dry powder along the ridgeline at the very peak of your roof, and then you do nothing else. The next rainfall dissolves the zinc particles and carries them downward across every shingle on both sides of the roof slope. As the zinc ion solution contacts the living moss tissue, it attaches to proteins and organic compounds inside the moss cells and disrupts their cell walls and metabolic processes simultaneously. The moss cells lose the ability to retain moisture and begin dying from the inside out within days. Over 2 to 3 weeks following treatment, the dead moss turns brown, dries out completely, and detaches naturally as continued rainfall washes it off the surface. You do not scrub, you do not pressure wash. You do not climb onto the roof at any point in this process. Oregon State University confirmed that a single dry powder application of zinc sulfate can suppress moss regrowth for up to 2 full years under normal rainfall conditions. 2 years of complete biological protection from one application that takes less than 10 minutes of your time and costs between $4 and $8 in materials. Let me stop here on the pressure washing point specifically, because this is where a large number of homeowners make a decision that actively accelerates the roof damage they are trying to prevent. Pressure washing is widely believed to be the standard method for cleaning a mossy roof. It is also one of the most destructive things you can do to asphalt shingles. Asphalt shingles are coated with tiny ceramic granules that protect the underlying bitumen from ultraviolet radiation and thermal stress. A pressure washer strips those granules off the surface with every pass, exactly the way sandpaper removes material from a soft surface. Once the protective granule layer is gone, the raw asphalt beneath is directly exposed to sunlight and temperature cycling. It cracks, blisters, and fails years before its rated lifespan should allow. Here's the detail that makes this even more significant. Shingle warranties from every major manufacturer explicitly state that pressure washing voids the warranty entirely. The method that most homeowners believe is correct for roof cleaning actually destroys the physical material and cancels the warranty coverage at the same time, and none of the parties who profit from that outcome, not the hardware store selling the pressure washer, not the roofing contractor who will eventually replace the damaged roof, not the shingle manufacturer whose warranty exclusion is buried in fine print, has any financial incentive to tell you before you make the mistake. Now, let us talk about the economics behind why this compound has stayed invisible to most homeowners despite being available at garden centers for decades. The roofing contractor industry in the United States generates over $76 billion in annual revenue. According to industry data, 79% of all roofing work performed annually is not new construction. It is replacement and renovation of existing roofs that have failed prematurely. The entire business model of the American roofing sector is built on a predictable cycle of roof deterioration and replacement. In 2024, roof-related insurance claims in the United States totaled over $31 billion. Every participant in that ecosystem, contractors, material suppliers, shingle manufacturers, insurance adjusters, benefits financially when roofs fail on a regular schedule. A $4 powder that prevents the primary biological cause of premature shingle failure represents a direct threat to that revenue cycle. The manufacturers already know this technology works, because some of them are already using it selectively. GAF sells a premium shingle product line with copper-lined granules embedded during manufacturing, specifically to prevent algae discoloration. Owens Corning offers a similar product with copper integrated into the shingle surface. Both manufacturers know that copper ions prevent biological growth. Both have the ability to embed antimicrobial protection into every shingle they produce at minimal additional manufacturing cost. Both deliberately offer it only on premium product lines at significantly higher price points, while leaving standard shingles completely unprotected. You cannot patent zinc or copper. They are naturally occurring minerals. You cannot create a subscription revenue model around a treatment that works for 2 years per application. The economics of antimicrobial protection built into every shingle do not support the replacement cycle that drives most of the industry's revenue. So the standard shingle stays unprotected, the moss grows, the damage accumulates, and the replacement call eventually comes in on schedule. Here's exactly how to apply this yourself, step by step, beginning this weekend. Go to any hardware store or garden center and look for zinc sulfate monohydrate powder. Brand names to search for include Moss Beware by Corey's and Moss Out by Lily Miller. A 3-pound bag typically costs between $3 and $5. For a standard residential roof between 1,500 and 2,000 square feet, you will need 6 to 9 pounds of powder total. Wait for a dry day with no rain in the forecast for at least 48 hours after application, because you want the powder to sit on the ridgeline long enough to be dissolved gradually by the next natural rainfall, rather than washed off immediately by a heavy rain event. You do not need to climb onto the roof for this application. Use a long-handled garden scoop or attach a plastic cup to a telescoping extension pole and sprinkle the dry powder evenly along the ridgeline at the very peak of your roof, using approximately 3 pounds per 600 square feet of surface area. That is the entire process. The powder sits on the ridge and waits for rain. When rain arrives, it dissolves the zinc particles and carries the solution down every shingle on both sides of the slope. The zinc ions do their work on the moss cells over the following 2 to 3 weeks, and the dead moss washes away with continued rainfall without any physical intervention from you. For long-term permanent prevention that requires no repeated powder applications, install zinc or copper strips along the ridgeline, tucked just under the top row of shingles. Zinc strips cost approximately $150 for a standard residential roof and release protective ions with every rainfall for 3 to 5 years. Copper strips last even longer and can protect shingles for the remainder of their rated lifespan. A homeowner in Portland, Oregon documented that a single zinc strip installation kept his north-facing roof completely moss-free for 5 consecutive years with 0 additional treatment or professional cleaning visits. His neighbor on the same street spent over $3,000 on professional moss removal services during those same 5 years and still experienced moss returning every season because the treatments addressed the existing growth without preventing the next cycle. One practical note worth mentioning: if your roof currently has established heavy moss coverage, the zinc sulfate powder treatment will kill the existing moss and allow it to wash away over 2 to 3 weeks. For very heavy established growth, you may find it helpful to gently brush off the dead material after it has dried and browned, using a soft bristled brush on an extension pole with light strokes moving downward in the direction of the shingle overlap. Never brush upward against the shingle direction. And never use any tool aggressive enough to dislodge the granule layer. After clearing the dead material, a follow-up powder application establishes the preventive residual effect. Leave a comment below and tell me what your roof situation looks like right now. Do you already have visible moss, or are you catching this early enough to go straight to prevention? I want to hear where people are in this, because the right approach is slightly different depending on how established the growth already is. The comments on this channel are where those specific conversations happen. If you own a home, or if someone you know just got a roofing quote for moss damage or is paying for annual professional moss removal, share this video with them. The $4 bag was on the shelf the entire time. Subscribe to Everyday Secrets formula so you are here when the next one drops, because the pattern we traced in this video, affordable prevention sidelined by profitable replacement, shows up in more areas of home ownership than most people have ever stopped to examine, and we are nowhere near finished.